There's something wonderfully reassuring about studying history, and it's probably down to this. It's all about facts and dates. Now, of course, there are endless interpretations as to why one country went to war with another or what actually caused a revolution, but no one can dispute the facts. That is, unless you are acclaimed TV historian Dan Snow, who actually got a first-class honours degree in history from Oxford, but was clearly off the day they studied World War II. When his 6-year-old daughter ran through a museum display celebrating the Spitfire aircraft, chanting, "Boy, boy, boy," concerning the pilots, Snow decided history needed rewriting and told her women had flown the aircraft in combat, defending this with some waffle about allowing her to follow her dreams. What happens the day she discovers the truth from a teacher or a friend? Why didn't he tell her that without women, many of the planes would neither have been built nor indeed delivered? Yeah. He might put the snow in snowflake, but you really wouldn't expect this don't know much about history attitude from him.
Oh, that was highly enjoyable. It was. I have some sympathy with Dan Snow, even though as an academic, even telly-historian, you rest on your reputation. And once you've broadcast that you've lied to your own daughter about something so stupid as that, you know, where do you come back from that? Yeah. But I might tell a quick story, because he wanted his daughter to see that women could have daring, exciting, adventurous lives, like the men who were in the cockpits of those Spitfires in the museum. And very quickly, when I was about 7, and my brother Boris was about 8, some family friend came and sort of patted us on the head and said, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" And so I looked up at him and I said, "A wife and mother." And then he said, "And you, Alexander," because that was what his name was. "And what do you want to do when you grow up?" And he went, "World king." Oh, my God!
He's on his way. Jude, let's bring you in on this, because there is undoubtedly an argument, discussion to be had about how women had been held back and how women have advanced. And, you know, we might tell fibs about the Tooth Fairies and the Easter Bunny. Yeah. Not Father Christmas, because he is true. He does exist. He does exist, everybody.
Mother Christmas.
Yeah, indeed, of course, yeah. But you actually would have been better for the fellow to say, look, that was then. Look how women have come forward. Darling, you can become a pilot. Yeah. Is that not the way to go forward?
Yeah, and you know, I know Dan very well, and I love Dan, and clearly, you know, he was well-intentioned and his heart was in the right place in terms of doing this, but I think as a historian, he actually should have looked into history a little bit more, because there are lots of amazing women who've done phenomenal things against all the odds. Why not tell your daughter about them? There are so many great women that he could have taught his daughter about without lying.
What he should have told them was that there was 166 women pilots in the war, but that's by the by. You know, he must surely know what women did. They kept this country going.
Yes.
They worked in the fields, they worked in factories, there were mechanics, there were electricians, they built, you rightly said, they built the planes.
Yeah, they did.
And actually, before the war started, it's interesting, there were only 5 million women in this country who worked. By 1943, there were 7 million women working. And the tragic thing is, after the war, those numbers kind of went back, but they were the precursor to the feminist movement, because those women told their kids about what they did, and it's no coincidence that in the early 60s the feminist movement started, and the biggest issue was gender inequality. That's what he should be telling his girls.
Greg, ever told any of your kids fibs?
Can't think of it. No, I don't think so.
What should Dan Snow have done?
Well, he should have... I mean, I feel a bit sorry for him, don't you? No. I mean, to have been caught out just on a throwaway line, you know, almost, to be caught out and to be then condemned by all of us, really. I think it was an unwise thing to do. But I think what you've got to try and do with your daughters is give them all the confidence you can.
Yeah.
That's the job of a parent now. Tell your daughters they can achieve.
You've got many
one second.
examples.
You've got sons and a daughter, if I'm right.
2 and 2.
Have they got? Do you think in Britain today, or the world today, because I think one of your sons, are they all equally get ahead?
Well, my daughter tells a very funny story recently of going for a job, and she was being headhunted, and she wasn't sure she was going to take it, and they said to her, the guy said to her, you know, why don't you go and ask your dad what he thinks? And she said, "You don't understand. My dad thinks I should have your job."
I like it.
And that's the thing.
That's
you want your
Do you
kids.
think boys and girls are equal in the workplace now?
No. Definitely not. Definitely. And all the data shows you that's not the case. Back to Rachel's point in terms of what little girls want to be when they grow up. So this is from a study which asked girls what they wanted to be, and if you look, The majority of girls, unfortunately, said artist, hairdresser, there's nurse, pop singer. Yeah.
Okay,
If we look at that, and then let's look at what the boys said. Oh, my goodness. So we have army, policeman, scientist, gamer, mechanic.
While we're doing that, let's look at some of the jobs the women did in the 1940s.
Yeah.
Let's look at what they did. Here we go. By 1943, 80 to 90% of women were working in factories on the land or in armed forces. There were 640,000 women in the armed forces. My man was one of them. Plus many more who flew unarmed aircraft. Away from these roles, more than 80,000 women joined the Women's Land Army and worked on the farmers' land girls. They endured really tough conditions and long hours in isolated rural outposts in order to prevent Britain from being starved out. That's the lesson.
That's what he should have spoken about,
should have spoken to his kids about.
I mean, it's wonderful to see that, you know, the war turned things around for women in the workplace, even though they went a bit backwards. But there are scientific journals that report that girls as young as 6, which is, I think, underlies Dan's comment,
She was 6, or is
think
6, sorry.
that there are girls' jobs and boys' jobs, and that they don't
As
have...
that data shows.
That data
But
shows.
it's true, Rachel.
And then this goes right the way through the workplace. I mean, this week's story is about how there are still only 27% of women on boards, and that men think if they've got one woman on a board, oh, you know, job done.
But isn't it better to prepare girls for that, to how to deal with that, rather than tell them a lie and say there is no gender
No, I
problem?
think they have to feel ambitious. They
Greg,
have to believe that the sky's the limit.
I want to bring Greg in this. We don't need to see all of what Mr. Snow said. This is how he ends it. I'm bringing her, my daughter, up in a way. She's hopefully seeing her gender as something that is not an obstacle to doing anything.
Good.
Yeah.
You think?
Here.
Yeah, we all agree with that.
Yeah,
but
the reality is it
you
is.
think it?
But,
Yeah,
no,
but
I'm not
Greg,
sure. I'm sure.
Gender
is
I'm
not
not sure.
that barrier.
I'm not sure telling her that women flew Spitfires is a good way of doing that.
Yeah.
But I think the sentiment is right.
Yeah.
You've got to tell but what I suspect is still happening is this is happening in the middle classes and less so in less able homes. I think. I don't think women are being. I don't think if you're coming off the average council estate, you are being told, like your brother, you can do anything.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely
Whereas
right.
I think in middle class homes that has
disagree.
changed.
June?
No.
I totally disagree. I think actually in working class homes, you're told you can do anything because you have to.
But why
because
would you
can't
believe that?
afford to.
When life has shown them differently.
No, my point is so in middle class homes, you have the luxury of perhaps not working if you don't want to. Working class women have had to work. My mum had to work her whole life because we couldn't afford not to.
But you can't believe the lie that women can do anything coming from that environment, because life has shown them they can't do anything, that there are limitations. They're taught to be grateful for what they have.
But they're not brought up to think that they're less than men. The idea is nobody can do well if you're from that sort of
I think a
background,
lot
but
of women-
everybody has to work.
I think a lot of women in working class communities
It really is.
I do think, I mean, just from my own experience of watching my daughters as they grow up, most of it is I do think they suddenly become aware they're going for a career, they don't know, and then suddenly they realise in their 30s, hang on, what do I do? Do I now have kids or don't I? What do I do about it? And I don't think there's any doubt that if you start, as a woman, if you now say, oh, I'm going to have a couple of kids, you probably lose 3 or 4 years in
Maybe
your
more.
career, in the advancement of your career.